Thanks everyone for coming out today and hearing what we have to say. I actually have about 2 presentations here we're going to go through. The first one I'm going to do is about a new tool called Club Excellence that we launched this past year, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what that may be, whether you used it this past year, whether you used it extensively or just lightly, or if you'd like to use it, it's free for associations to use, and it's to help you as board members operate more effectively and efficiently and really get the most out of your donated time that we very much appreciate. And then the other part is just a back to basics course of sorts of what it means to serve on a board, not just a youth hockey board, but to serve on any sort of nonprofit organization and what should be expected of you, best practice, what you should expect of your team as you go forth for the season. So, like George said, my name is Kevin. I work at the national office. I'm lucky enough because I get a really cool job. My one job is I get to get little kids on the ice to play hockey. So all the try hockey stuff you've done and 2-on-2 challenge, that's me. So I get little kids to play hockey. It's a lot of fun. And the other part is I get to work with volunteers, which the volunteers, and I mean it honestly, the volunteers at USA Hockey are the best volunteers in the country. Where we're at in Colorado Springs that's where the U.S. Olympic Committee is headquartered. And there's 43 national governing bodies. So the USA Volleyballs, USA Swimming, USA Hockey is a national governing body of youth hockey. So it's fun because we were recently rated by the U.S. Olympic Committee as the #1 national governing body in the whole NGB universe. And we are actually, you should be very, very proud, thanks to folks like you in this room and you. Youth hockey is one of only 2 youth team sports that are growing in the United States. Lacrosse and hockey are the only ones that are growing. So it's great when you can go in a room and people say, wait, you've got one of the more expensive and one of the sports that people have to commit to a little bit longer, but yet you're outpacing the soccers and the baseballs and the footballs and whatnot, all the core American sports. How's that going? And truly it's and I'm not just saying it's because our volunteer base. You guys are very dedicated, and I said we got nobody more dedicated and people I love being around than our volunteers. So for me, when I get to do Club Excellence stuff and talk about volunteerism, I love it because it tugs at my passion, because all of you have the same mindset as me that we're going to grow this sport and do it well. And I'm really glad to be here at this meeting. I was joking, and I told George a little bit of the story, but not the full story. This past week, I grew up on a farm and I wasn't very handy. And there's a reason why I work in hockey, because I wasn't very good at fixing stuff. And I decided to do a renovation project on my house. So if you can see, I got like all these blood blisters, and I have no feeling in my fingers right now. And it's still not done. I ran out of wood for the hardwood floors, and my wife's like, what are we going to do? And I said, I don't care. I'm going to Michigan to go talk to volunteers. So I'm super excited to be here because it got me a nice break after 12 days of being on my hands and knees hammering wood. So first we're going to talk a little bit about Club Excellence. I talked about our volunteers are at core of what we do, and I think sometimes we need to be reminded of that. No matter, we just had our annual Congress meetings in Colorado Springs where there were 600 people there. We have 90 plus voting members, committees, sections, all these people making decisions. But no matter what happens, youth hockey comes down to the local community-based program, the local rink, the local association. So no matter what's done on a national level, no matter what's done here at the district affiliate level, if we don't have people in place that are like you at the local level, none of it goes forward. You are USA Hockey. And so you put forth organizational programs like our Grow the Game initiatives, our ADM, our coaching development, things like that is all done because of you. And when you're a parent, I say it all the time, just as a parent, I may get communications from the school district or from the state, but my contact with education is my kid's teacher. And that's the most important person to me in that world. So you're the most important person to those people's children when it comes to their hockey development. So Club Excellence was designed to equip all youth hockey associations with the knowledge and tools to offer the best youth sports program in their community. So we just celebrated our 80th season of USA Hockey. And we do a really good job of our database system and registration systems, light years yet. I mean, USA Swimming still does paper registrations, I found out. And they're like the #2 NGB. So we're light years ahead in the registration world and knowing who our customers are. So we know the kids on the ice, we know our coaches, we know our officials, but the funny part is we discovered a couple of years ago is that the people actually running the clubs and in charge of executing and making youth hockey happen in their communities, we don't actually know who they are because there's changeover. It's hard to track. Some affiliates may know, but from a national perspective, I don't. If I had to send something out tomorrow, a couple years ago, obviously, but even now to a certain degree, let's say the IRS changed everything tomorrow on requirements for nonprofits. How would I get that to the treasurers? We don't know who they are. Or some great bonus from, let's say, the state, is giving some incentive to youth sports programs. How do we get that in the hands of the president so they can take advantage of that? And we don't know who they are. So it seems kind of funny. How do we connect that gap? So when we talk, and this is not uncommon with any large organization, corporate, nonprofit, youth sports, national office staff is there. We try and communicate through the districts and affiliates, and they push the message down to local associations. And a lot of times for several years, the only real updated contact we had was the registrar, because the registrar had to register with USA Hockey to get access to the registry software. And so we left it up to that poor registrar to make sure they're disseminating information to their board and to make sure everyone who got it knew what was going on. And then in the end, that local association's got to take that information and get it out to the families. And two things that drive me nuts is when a poor volunteer in the local level is spending their free time trying to provide the best youth sport experience for their child, and they may miss something, and then they get fined or yelled at or disciplined for volunteering their time. And the reasoning was either, well, it was on the website, you should have seen it. It was in that 300-page guidebook we provided you. You should be able to catch that subsection C, or I sent you an email. And I know how many emails I get, and I'm just a local coach right now. I'm not even on a board at the time with my kids because I'm just have my 3 kids running around. And I can only imagine the emails you get from your board, from your families, from the local structure. So, and there's a stat that only like 74% of emails actually make it through. So to me, that's just not an effective communication structure. So how do we get to something more like this where, our local association people are central and they know what's going on at all components. And so we want to deliver it through this Club Excellence piece that this past year was the first year we had offered it up. At any point too, like we'll get to a point where you can offer up if you used it, if you didn't use it. I want to hear your experience as a volunteer, like stuff, whether you used the program and what was helpful or not helpful, or just your experience as a volunteer. Say, hey, when I first started as a youth hockey leader, God, I really wish someone would have told me X, Y, and Z because it would have saved me a lot of heartache. Because a lot of times what happens is someone's there and they say, hey, we need a treasurer. It's like, hey, I'm pretty good at balancing the checkbook. You don't know what a 990 form is or anything like that, but I'll be the treasurer. And they're following the process from the previous treasurer. And they may have been applying bad practices from maybe the Little League program they helped with, or they just didn't know what they're doing. And you just continue that trend of maybe not knowing clarity what you should be doing. So Club Excellence is structured around 3 buckets. The first is administration, so helping you as a leader on a board to be able to, as they say in the nonprofit world, lead with intent. All this content here in the administration world, we're about 3 years in of actual research in this. We went to other national governing bodies that offer really great training. I was lucky enough to get introduced to a gentleman out of University of Delaware who's like a world-renowned, not just in the United States, but world-renowned sport club administration expert. Like he's written several books on it. And he's actually done soccer. He does it like international certificates for people that run like the big soccer programs in Europe and whatnot. And he's been helping develop that for hockey. And even just, I don't know if anyone's heard Board Source. It's a nonprofit that teaches boards how to govern with intent. So we've tried to get a hold of the best practices, like the best of the best we can, to help you guys know what that means and help the experience more fulfilling for you. So strategic planning. I know on a local level, how many people actually know what their mission statement is, or their vision statement, or their core values. Is that identified with your board, so that when you make a decision as a board, what are you basing that off of? I even asked a couple USA Hockey volunteers, what's USA Hockey's mission, and it was kind of entertaining to see what came back. So I think when we're making decisions, we need to know what our strategic plan is, and if not, we need to reevaluate that, because it should be evaluated every year. Fiscal development. something that's very overlooked that actually is one of the most important things. You sit on a board. Fiscal management and financial development is not left up to just the audit committee, the budget committee, or the treasurer. It's something every board member should scour through and look at length and ask questions. And asking questions, whether you know or not, is at the core of it all. So how do we make sure you know the questions to ask? And then governance, just running a board. And you're given your free time to be on a board, and it should be a rewarding experience. So if you're holding a board, how do you make sure that all your board members are engaged and enjoying the experience so that they want to keep coming back? And then the next bucket is hockey development. So ADM, our American Development Model, I don't know if you know this, is recognized by the U.S. Olympic Committee as something that needed to happen at all levels. So now every national governing body has to now have an ADM. And so we lent our logo to the USOC. So now every sport now has, and it has had to, based off what we've had, they're using the ADM logo, but where USA Hockey is, they have volleyball or swimming or whatever in there. So we're way ahead of the curve. And I think it's so massive, and people automatically just say it's cross ice. It's from your first touch of the ice to become an elite player or just a recreational player. And even, I'm speaking now, I'm taking off my USA Hockey hat, put my parent hat. There's nothing else that my children do where someone can come to me and say, hey, we have the best practices based on sports science and age appropriate to maximize your kids' fun and development. It just doesn't exist. Like some of the other sports my kids have, I guarantee they just go out there and they let them run around and run into each other. So to me, we are a little more expensive, a little more of a commitment. But the reason we're growing is because we're trying to be the very best youth sport program in the community. And something like ADM is so core. If I'm a parent and they say, hey, it's going to be a lot more than your youth soccer program, but we're applying best practices to your child to make sure we just don't maximize them as a hockey player, we maximize them as an athlete and to maximize their enjoyment. So that's a huge selling point that I think we drive well to our coaches. But as an administrator, you know, what are you basing and developing your programs around? Are you developing around making sure that these kids are getting the appropriate stuff they need at the right age? And if you get cornered by a parent, and that parent's like, why are we doing this thing, you know, a lot of times you just aren't informed enough, and I feel like, you know, you're just like, hey, well, USA Hockey or MAHA said we had to do it, instead of saying, hey, we have a program that's going to maximize your kids' potential and fun, and here's all the science and resources that we can provide you to teach you why youth hockey is better than any other youth sport and why you're the smartest consumer out there, excuse me. And our coaching education. It's extensive, and sometimes it can be, you got to chase your coaches around, but once again, this is a hard sport to teach, and if people don't have that experience to teach it, it's just not a good experience. And I know, just once again, parent hat on, all the stuff my kids have done that we haven't gone back to was due to just bad coaching. Like, you know, my kids like dance, but they had a great dance teacher, which was surprised me because I never thought they'd want to do that. I wanted to do soccer. My twins had a great coach. The older one had a bad coach. It was me. She doesn't want to play soccer anymore. The twins want to play soccer. So it's core to us growing and doing what we do. And then the following is volunteer development. So I hate the term parent education. I don't think any parent wants to be told they need to be educated on how to be a parent. I think you turn them off automatically. So I like the term more consumer education. So how do we give you the tools to teach your parents why they're smarter than every other parent because they chose your program in youth hockey, and then they go on and tell everybody why they're smarter than everyone else too. And getting more volunteers and keeping more volunteers so that if you're dedicating your free time to your program, how does that make sure it's a fulfilling experience for everybody? So within the Club Excellence portal, the internet wasn't working great, so I put these up. How it works is that if you're the president or vice president of your local program, you go to usahockey.com/Club Excellence. I'll show it again later, so don't feel like you have to get it. You apply for access to your portal, and we let you into the portal, and then that president or vice president goes and invites the rest of the board to join them on top of that. Now, that portal is unique to your club. No other youth program has access to your portal, so it's your online home for, you know, your XYZ association. And the great part is now when you start adding your board members, now we can help connect the dots. So like, once again, my example, if the IRS changes something tomorrow, we can make sure your treasurer gets the latest information, you know, and connect the Secretary of State and do everything we need to do to help you out. And within each portal, you know, once again, I hate saying go to the website because there's everything on a website and how you're supposed to find what you really need. So we've taken all the content, tasks, and resources that relate directly to each position. So if you're the hockey director or the secretary, how do we make sure that exactly what you need to do, and none of the other stuff that doesn't relate to you is what you need and gets in your hands. So each job has unique job descriptions. I think that's really important, as we find that a lot of people that don't do a good job, a lot of times it's because they weren't really told what they're getting themselves into. They say, oh, it'll take like an hour or two a week, and it's taking 10 hours a week, and it really wasn't in their wheelhouse. So we have these job descriptions here that you can utilize to help figure out who the best candidates are. Just changed a month ago. These are now dynamic, so you can change these job descriptions. So if your vice president does a little bit more, like they're in charge of social media, I don't know, or volunteer recruitment, you can change that in the job description, and it'll live on. So when I retire from being the vice president and you come in and you're the new vice president, that job description is unique to your club, and it stays there, so they can, once again, you can make that job more core to your club. There's also tasks, so it's by month, and it's by category. So your hockey development tasks, your financial tasks, your governance tasks, and it walks you through a season of everything you should look at and be thinking of, so that hopefully you can stay ahead of the game, because I think a lot of times it just becomes either you don't know what's going on, or it's been laid in your lap and it becomes a little overwhelming, and then you just don't have the time, so it doesn't get done. So the tasks are there to help you, and it's, once again, job specific. So everything you're doing here relates to the role you should be doing. And once again, for the new season, this is now dynamic too. So you can hide tasks, don't relate to what you do. You can add tasks to make that job more core to what you want. We just made the feature too where you can make jobs. So if you have, we only have the core jobs up there, like president, vice president, treasurer, you know. But I know a lot of people, I've had people say, hey, we have 6 vice presidents. Well, great, now you can make all the vice president jobs you want on there, and it lives only with your club, so no one else sees it except for your association. I always tell the story I thought was funny, is that I had an intern, I gave her the worst job ever. I said, okay, you have about 2,000 association websites, and you just scour through and find out what like job descriptions are in there, and what do we need to figure out what we need to build. And she came to me and she said, is this a legit board position? And it actually was. I looked at their bylaws. It was a voting board position. This group in Alaska, the board position was roast beef dinner coordinator. So I was like, I will volunteer happily to be the roast beef dinner coordinator. They had a vote off the board. But if you have a roast beef dinner coordinator, you can add that roast beef dinner coordinator on that job description. But I know, like, even we've been trying to work with affiliates to figure out stuff that's core to that state. Like in Minnesota, nonprofits can gain like a gambling license, and they can hold like bingo, or I don't know if you guys know what pull tabs are. They're like really silly lotto tickets in a sense, but that's how they raise money for their program. But you have to have a gambling coordinator, so now how do we filter in those positions to that area of the country to help them out? Within that, there's resources. So we've tried to take everything down to 1 to 2 page resources so that it's a little more digestible. Instead of saying, here's that annual guide you got to read through and memorize. And more than just the USA Hockey, just nonprofit best practices. So like here's examples of a strategic plan. So if you have never done a strategic plan, or if you haven't done it in a while and need to review it, we broke it down to 4 worksheets, something you can do over a couple meetings. So it's not like it's something out there and intimidating and big. It's easy. It's a 1-page piece, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you have guiding values for your association. And so part of that too is there's an event feature, so you can manage your meetings. We have recommended agendas, because I think a lot of times what happens is that you start your season out and you want to conquer the world, and the first meeting's 3 or 4 hours, and then you burn everyone down, and then you get to February, and all you end up talking about is that one family who's causing an issue, instead of actually working about how do we look forward versus dealing with a small issue, the 1%. So here's something like in February in a recommended agenda, you can work on your SWOT analysis. And it helps too, because then your volunteers don't get burnt out, and they feel like they're making a difference and not dealing with the same old, so you can have engaging meetings throughout the year. And so there's a lot of resources. A lot of these resources will be turned into videos soon, and e-learning pieces. I know video is king. I don't particularly like the learning way of watching a 10-minute video and answering 3 questions. I think you start spacing out. You're probably spacing out now. Listen to me now for 15 minutes. But a 10-minute video wears me out. So I don't know how much you've done with e-learning. We're looking into e-learning programming and software where it's like more interactive, where you have to click here or answer questions, so you have to stay engaged with the program. So to see more content like this, just best practices put into e-learning software so that you can do it topic specific in like a 5-minute piece if you want to learn more about just this. And just so you know, this is how we went the first year. I was quite pleased. We had about a third of the country gain access to the portal. Now, some people used it extensively. Some people, I think, logged in one time. We're going to work more and more to drive this back to the portal. What's great about this is that this portal is built around a registry system. So over time, it's going to become more and more connected to your registry. So that the hope is down the road that if you have to send a message to your 10U families, that's all. As long as they're claimed, they're all within the registry. You can connect instantly with those people. And how can we make stuff instantly ready and going? So something that's in the portal, just as a side note, like a resource, is that instead of you trying to look up and research everything age-specific about 10U players that matches practice plans in the month of November, and write that email out to your parents, because communication is key and transparency is key. We have email templates. So if I'm the hockey development coordinator and I want to send a message to my parents at 10U and say, hey, month of November, we're going to be doing all this stuff. It may seem silly, but it's going to maximize your kids' explosiveness and skating skills, which fits right in age appropriate. And then all of a sudden I get that email from a parent. We'll write it for you. We have guys, like Bob Mancini and everybody that's expert, but we'll make you sound like the expert, and all of a sudden like, holy cow, this guy down the street or this lady down the street like really knows how to make an athlete. And this is great. I thought they were just playing tag, but apparently like my kid's going to be like an explosive skater. They're really maximizing their potential. So that's an example of a resource how we're trying to make your life easier and keep connecting it back to the registry. In Michigan, we had 39% of programs do it. So what do you say next year we get over 50? I'd love that. That'd be great. Come back here next year and say 50% plus. Some new features. Like I said, you can add tasks, you can hide tasks, you can make custom roles. The president and vice president can now go in to when they want to monitor. You can now click. They can see, like if I'm Danny down here front and I want to see what's going on in the treasures, you can now actually click on the treasure and go into their portal and see what they've clicked on and done. I don't want to be big brother, but I'll let you guys be big brother, because I think a lot of times you say, hey, are you keeping up? And they say, yeah, we're keeping up. But now Danny can go in and say, hey, you haven't done anything in 2 months. Are you actually balancing the books? Are you doing this stuff? And help you make sure that your board's on pace. And we're building more, too, to make sure you get more affiliate-specific stuff. I know Georgia sent some stuff over to Brittany, who works with me, and she loaded it up so that when you punch in a MAH, so a MIH, sorry, I was a mass the other week, MIH association code, content within the portal matches what Michigan may need. So then how do we take stuff like your affiliate agreement and things like that you don't have to search around the website, that we can say, hey, in the beginning of the season, you got to fill out your affiliate agreement. It's right in your resources. There's an affiliate resource center, and it can help streamline your life so that not only you're hearing from me at the national office and George and everybody at the MAHA board, hopefully we can save them some emails and save you some emails, and you can move ahead and make it a little more streamlined. So the hope is that we, I know this is dry stuff, that's why we have a lot of pictures of the kids to keep you engaged. I said, when I had Brittany make the presentation, I said, put lots of kids in there and make it very entertaining. Hopefully, we want to help you keep your leadership. We want to make sure, once again, I say it a lot, but we want to be the best youth sport program offered, because that's the only way we're going to overcome costs that are just tied to a program is inherent. It costs money to keep ice frozen. So things to be able to keep conquering those hills and keep growing like we're growing. We actually just hit all-time records at all levels in participation last year. So once again, we're an 80-year-old product. Lacrosse is fairly new, and there's nothing better than watching the Little League World Series and saying, hey, they used to say over 1 million kids playing, now they can only say close to 1 million kids playing. I'm not even going to get into, I have a friend that works for USA Football, I'm not even going to get into the issues they're dealing with participation, but it's fun. In a world where people say kids are not participating in sports and that sport participation is going down, the sport that isn't America's pastime yet is growing. So I always joke, I'm not going to be satisfied until I sit down Monday night, and I'm going to make this football joke, but it's Monday night hockey, not Monday night football. So we'll usurp the Lions with some Red Wing games on Monday night that everyone watches. Just some new positions we're putting in there. So just so you know, a national level, goaltending's become a big thing. So we're working with our goaltending person to put that goaltending development. We're trying to add some positions that are optional you may want to add. There's a push from our safety committee. There's an on-ice safety person. So just something to help distribute best practices for concussion protocol and things like that. And something else we're building right now is how do you know if you're doing a good job if you have no way of measuring yourself? So we built out, it's actually pretty extensive. So it'll seem intimidating, which it should be a little bit, is that an association analysis both on and off the ice in the boardroom and knowledge of the on-ice programs that we're hoping associations will do at the beginning of the season, maybe at midway through the season and at the end of the season to see, hey, this is how we measure up in our board meetings, this is how we measure up in communication, here's where we measure up in knowledge of on-ice programming and things like that. I have it in paper form. If anyone wants, I'll give it to you in paper form. My hope is that I think there's a flaw, because I stole a lot of this from other GPs, and I never told them, but the flaw with their program is that if I'm sitting here, I'm the president, and I say, hey, how do you think our meetings are run? Do you think they're run really great? And you're going to say, you don't want to hurt my feelings. Say, yeah, we have great meetings. And in your mind, you're like, they're absolute torture. I'd rather be going to the dentist right now. So we're working to build in the portal like a piece that I can say, okay, I'm the president. In your portal right now, I need you to fill out this board assessment by next month. And then you do it anonymously. And then we get a rating like 1 out of 5 and say, hey, I thought we were having really great meetings, but apparently you rated a 1.9 in how we manage it out of 5. So let's sit down, here's some resources so we can evaluate how we do a better job, and then you can speak your mind, and then and it's not to rate you against anyone else, it's totally an internal thing to make sure that you can rate yourself and improve yourselves. So if you want to get started in this piece here, it's usahockey.com/clubexcellence. We ask that it's the president or vice president that goes in first, because we feel like it should start from the top of the board to say, hey, our board is going to take this on. And we just make sure you're the president or vice president. It's not just an enthusiastic parent that wants to get in there and see everything. And then you'll get an invite to get on the board, and then you can invite the rest of your board members to join us. So if you have any questions, obviously I'm around all weekend, but it's Brittany and myself that works on this. So even if you start looking through it or you start thinking, tell us. Because once again, the great part is that the one thing I don't want to hear is that people say, this doesn't work for us. And it's very pliable. By this time next year, I'm even hoping, right now it's based around if you pretty much have a nonprofit, soup to nuts, learn to play to midget program. But this time next year, I'm hoping that you can go in and select, because from a USA Hockey perspective, we don't track if you're a high school program. I mean, we know high school programs. We don't know if you're a for-profit rink program, if you're a nonprofit rink, if you're a tier 1. There's ways we know, but not in the registry. So we're hoping next year you can go in and you can say, hey, I'm a disabled program. Or we have a disabled program and we're a regular soup to nuts nonprofit program. Or we have an adult program or a high school program. And then the content can change to make sure that matches what you need. Like something I never even thought of, and a guy came to me from high school program. He's like, I said, it's not really built for you guys. I said what I don't want to hear. Like, this doesn't work for me. And he's like, yeah, but our board, because kids are normally on a high school team 2 to maybe 3 years, our board turns over every year. And no one knows what to do. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, stuff anything, tell us, and it's very pliable, and we can change it and make it sure it works for you guys. So, that's presentation 1 down. Any questions on this before I move ahead to the next piece? Perfect. Like I said, I'm around all weekend, so if you just want to chit chat about it, I'm always available. So the second one I want to talk about is just getting back to basics, kind of what's at the core of serving on a board and what that should mean. And unfortunately, I made this presentation and not Brittany, so there's not a lot of good pictures there. It's a lot of words, and I apologize. So this part, every time it's been delivered to me, it's been delivered by lawyers. I took the LSATs, but I chickened out, did not go to law school, so hopefully I do a little more entertaining job. Sorry, Steve, if you're in the room, but I'll try and keep it as entertaining as possible. If you have questions, please stop me and ask the question, because there's a lot there, and so I'll try not to keep it dry. So really, when you look at board governance, it comes down to these 4 things. This is what every volunteer on a board needs to know, not just the president. Like if you're on a board, serving on a board, these are things you should know and you should read and review and know well. It's interesting because a couple stories. I was in Minnesota last month, and we were talking through a lot of stuff, and this guy raised his hand. He's like, I would never have really cared or paid attention. And then our president, he goes, last year our president resigned, and we went in and we realized we had no directors and officers insurance. We hadn't followed any of our bylaws. We hadn't followed any of our policies and procedures. And we realized if someone caught us, we were all in trouble as board members, like legally in trouble. Because you do have a legal obligation when you serve a board. It's not one of these things where you can say, I didn't know any better, so you get out of control. You as being on a board, unfortunately, there are certain things tied to being on that board that you are responsible for. And even when we were building Club Excellence overall, it kind of was interesting. We went and we asked every affiliate to give us one or maybe even 2 or 3 associations if you're a bigger affiliate, some of their better ones, so we could learn how they function and we could base it off that. And at one point I said, you know what, I'd like to get some bylaw best practices. And so we had sent emails out to all these the top 44 associations in the country. And it was amazing to me how many people didn't know where the bylaws were. Or someone had one paper copy and no one knew who had the paper copy. Or I asked to see it and they said, well, I'm not really comfortable giving it to you. Well, technically by law, you have to have your bylaws on your website. It has to be transparent. And they didn't even want to let me see it. They don't want anyone to see what's going on. So a lot of stuff is just to make sure that you kind of know what's expected of you as serving on a board. So you need to have a mission. You need to let people know what the purpose of the association, what's guiding that long-term direction. When you go into a boardroom and you're making decisions, are you making decisions based off your kids' team and what you're personally dealing with, or are you basing it off what matches your mission and where the organization's going? Core values. So what do you represent? And I think this is something, people may have a mission and they haven't looked at it in a while, but I've noticed a lot of associations don't have core values. So when they make an association, or even people are serving on a board, what do I identify with? Like if we're here to win a state championship, then I guess that's your core value, but I don't know. Are you here to make kids have a great experience and develop social and mental and build skills and build friendships and things like that? Then that's something I can get behind as a volunteer. And when I'm making my decision to make sure that this is what's best for the kids, to make sure that they're maximizing that experience that matches our values and our mission. Your bylaws. So those should reflect how you hit that vision and mission, how you hit those goals long term. It should tell you how you operate as a business. So essentially, this is, you open up your package, here's your product, that's your association. That bylaw is your instructions. Now, how do I put this together? So once again, if I would have read the instructions for putting my hardwood floors, if I would have read my bylaws, I wouldn't have all these blood blisters on my hands. So I did not follow my bylaws this past week, and that's why my wife's mad at me right now. And then policies and procedures are more, how do you carry out those bylaws? Bylaws are more from 10,000 feet up, how we execute as a business. Bylaws is day to day. So you have to be really cognizant of this, because something I've kind of gone in and found out is that people confuse the two. Bylaws can normally only be changed at your annual meeting once a year. And people get a little too much into their bylaws. And so, for instance, I saw one thing where they had a bylaw rule that every house team could only have 1 goalie. Well, then the 4 house teams had 5 goalies. And because of their bylaws, they couldn't let a kid on that 4th team. Instead of a policy procedure, you can change as needed, but still those instructions are there to let parents know how you operate day to day. So 10,000 feet, overall how you operate, and then day to day, just keep that in mind. So some bylaw best practices. Now, once again, in Club Excellence, I'll pump Club Excellence again. So we have a bylaw best practice. So if you're writing your bylaws or reviewing them, we have a document that tells you what elements you should have at minimum in your bylaws just to operate, so that it's a guide to help you move along. But in your bylaws, follow them. Make sure everybody on your board reads them, asks questions, understands them, because anytime you may get in trouble, and many times the reason it doesn't go past the board is because they didn't follow their bylaws. Actually, a lot of times, you don't have to be the bad guy. If you're doing something and a parent doesn't like it, most of the time it's in your bylaws. You say, hey, it's not me with a personal vendetta against you. This is our bylaws. This is how we operate. It's out there, transparent for you guys. This is how we are. This is our organization. Sorry. And something too, make sure they're compliant with the state. So you can go to your Secretary of State and see everything that's required. So a couple stories is that a guy that used to work in our office was kind of accidentally became the president of the local association, because the actual president that was getting voted in got transferred for his work. And so at the last minute, he had to become a president. And he was one of my guinea pigs for building out Club Excellence. And I was like, who's your vice president? He's like, we have 4 vice presidents. I said, great, what does that mean? And he's like, I don't know. I said, well, who, if you're not at the meeting, who takes over the meeting? He goes, I don't know. We don't have their bylaws. And then they had a bylaw that said if your kid plays for another program, you can't serve as a voting member of the board. Well, their registrar, their one son went and played Tier 1 across town. and didn't specify tier 2, tier 1, anything like that. So she had to step down as registrar. But they didn't have anything in place to replace that person. And so they were stuck trying to figure that out for a while. So just, once again, make sure you know. But what's also funny, too, is when I was in Minnesota, this is a Minnesota example again, is that it turned out in Minnesota you can't do proxy votes, and you can't vote electronically. So you can't do a conference call. The state doesn't recognize conference calls or voting by email because they feel in that state that people have to physically be at the meeting to vote. They shouldn't be able to hand their votes off or do it electronically. But yet, even the affiliate itself was doing conference call votes and things like that. So that technically they weren't legal. So just make sure that your bylaws match what's going on by going to the Secretary of State's office. And make sure, most importantly, make sure they fit your affiliate. I mean, you're here at the MAHA meetings, make sure it matches what MAHA needs of you too, because you don't want to be having bylaws that contradict the structure and the governance structure you live in and work with here. Get rid of the what ifs. So I just told that story where the registrar left, so what if the registrar leaves? How do we get him back on? You know, if you're going to put one bylaw in, what's the trickle-down effect of that? And put them on your website. Once again, make it transparent. Like, you should show people, be like, hey, this is who we are, and make sure your parents and your membership know that, so that if they have an issue, instead of you getting the email or angry phone call at 11 o'clock because this went on, hopefully, if they know your bylaws are there, they check that first and be like, well, it's right here. You know, we really don't have an argument. It's right here in the bylaws that we can't play up or whatever it may be, you know. So basic responsibilities of being on a board. Sorry, once again, lots of text. Trying to get past it. Determine that mission and purpose and advocate them. Everyone on your board should be behind that purpose. Otherwise, why are they serving on the board? If they aren't, don't get me wrong, conflict is healthy. Not agreeing and having discussions is healthy to a board. But inevitably, people should believe in the organization and its mission and purpose. And just have different ideas and thoughts on how to achieve that mission and purpose. So obviously, all this doesn't apply to every youth hockey association. Get a chief executive, so make sure you have someone that's in charge. Obviously, if you're a small organization, you may not have a paid person. Otherwise, if you are a large organization, you have a hockey director or a chief executive that acts in that place. Make sure that you have them selected and that they are evaluated and supported. And remember that person doesn't work for everybody in the association. They work for the board, but they go through the president. Make sure you're effectively planning and that you have adequate financial resources with your mission. So a lot of times you have this mission and purpose and you want to do all these great things, but part of your job is to make sure that there's fiscal and ice time and resources allocated to doing those. So it's on your job to make sure not just go in a room and say, I want to make sure that we're doing this for our 10U players. Well, if you're going to make that, make sure you know that they're getting the resources to be able to execute that. And you shouldn't, after tryouts, just be able to dust your hands off and walk away from the program. Throughout the year, as a board member, no matter what your role is, secretary, treasurer, or if you're the hockey development coordinator, the hockey director, so essentially, you should be monitoring and strengthening and listening to your people, figuring out how you make this program better. It's not done in September when tryouts are over. As a board member, you should be reaching out beyond the hockey world in your community. You want to make sure that it goes right back to our thing of being the best youth sport option within the community. You want to be the person trumpeting it from the top of the ceilings and going to Chamber of Commerce's, representing at league meetings, being representative at affiliate meetings. You guys are doing a great job. You're making sure that you guys are strengthening your organization's public standing. And legal and ethical integrity, not just your own ethical and legal integrity. You need to hold your other board members accountable. And if you think they're not holding up to the standards, you need to be able to say something. I don't know if everyone knows it, but in your bylaws or in your policies and procedures, you should at least have a whistleblower policy. It's actually mandated by law to have a whistleblower policy ever since Enron, that if you think someone's doing something illegal, you need to be able to speak up without worry of retribution upon yourself or your child. That it's in the policy saying that I can speak up and say, you know what, I don't want to pick on anybody, so I'll just point to the back of the room. Hey, I think you might be doing something that's a conflict of interest where you're padding your buddy's business for a contract to be able to do this for us, and I think it needs to be evaluated. And build a competent board. You know, things like terms are healthy. A lot of times people shouldn't sit in a board seat in the same seat for many, many years. There should be change. People should move around to different board positions. It's healthy to do. It avoids complacency. So if you're serving more specifically on a youth hockey board, Your job is to protect that association and its members and do what's best by not your child, but what's best, and which is hard. I think this is where a lot of people get tripped up, and I can say for my own self, it'd be tough to go against something that might not benefit my child for the betterment of the organization. I get it. Make sure it stays focused on its mission. Like, once again, I think people get buried in, like, hey, I'm more worried about our Pee-wees winning the state championship versus how's the experience from everybody, from my learn-to-play kids to our Bantam kids. Like, I got, when our guy took over the local association in Colorado Springs, there's a Tier 1 program, and then there's a Tier 2 program, and then the house program falls under there, and it's all under one blanket. Well, the mission was to grow youth hockey in the community, so on and so forth, but yet the board seemed to be highly focused on making sure that the Tier 1 program that only had 2 Colorado kids on it, not even Colorado Springs kids, 2 Colorado kids on it, was in contention for winning games and national championships. So if my job as a board member is to make sure that my overall, sorry, I mean the mic there, my overall membership is getting serviced, why am I worried so much about that one Tier 1 program? That doesn't really serve my membership as a whole. So just keeping that in mind as you make your things going. And follow your governing documents and procedures, like I said, making sure you know that stuff and operate in the best term of the association. So if you serve on a board, any nonprofit board, there's 3 nonprofit corporation laws that you're held to. This is what government holds you to. This is technically, legally, you're responsible for these 3 duties, the 3 Ds. Does anyone heard of the 3 Ds before? I'm just curious if you raise your hand, 3 Ds. So we have a couple. So as a board member, you have to abide by these as you serve. And a lot of times anyone who may get in legal trouble is because they didn't follow one of these 3 Ds. So the first is the duty of care. So utilizing your reasonable and informed judgment when making decisions that impact the association. So you have to be an active participant. You just can't show up to meetings and play on your phone, play Candy Crush the whole time. You have to be paying attention and be involved with what you do. Diligent oversight and understanding, don't just vote because you're afraid of being called out and you don't want to be the one person to say no to do something. If you don't know what they're voting on, it's up to you to ask that question. Because guess what? If they vote on it and it turns out to be something really horribly bad, you're still accountable for it. And you should at least ask those questions and be diligent in knowing what you're voting for. Going back to, hey, I didn't know, ignorance is bliss doesn't count in the nonprofit serving on a board world. So act in good faith, always be doing it for the betterment of the organization. You should review your meeting minutes, before you're prepared, before you go into your meeting. Have a working knowledge of all your governing documents. Be fiscally responsible. So examining those reports your treasurer gives you and asking questions, why did we pay this out to this person? Why are we have a contract with this service? Have we vetted that out with other vendors of late? Things you need to ask questions about. Use qualified experts when needed. Sometimes it's better, even if you have a lawyer on your board or a CPA. Sometimes you get to certain situations, it's good to say, you know what, this is probably a time where we seek outside counsel or go to a professional to audit our books to make sure that you may trust that person, but once again, they may not. God, I gave this presentation in Vermont, and there was a lawyer in the room, and I asked him, and he goes, I don't know, I'm only a trial lawyer, and they keep asking me all these legal questions, so I don't know. I don't actually know this stuff. So going outside to the experts is great. Sometimes, if you're a small organization too, if you go to law schools, I've heard, I can't confirm it, I've heard that a lot of times they'll do it pro bono as a class experience with their more experienced students to kind of audit, like your bylaws and things like that. So that's something to look into. And really know the benefits of USA Hockey. It's something else that was interesting going back to that 40-plus top associations is that we asked them questions about all the benefits that I think people know that there's insurance there for the participant and for the coach. But what shocked me was that how many board members didn't know how much insurance and risk management that was in place to protect the volunteer. So it's funny to me, not funny, it's kind of scary to me when people say, hey, I don't like how USA Hockey does this quote-unquote piece, so we're going to form a separate organization and we're going to self-insure or do this, and that. I say, great. Do you have directors and officers insurance? They go, what is that? Or what kind of legal liability, limited liability do you have to protect you? So what I've seen across the country is someone's done that, and then they've kicked the parent out of their outside organization, and that parent comes back and sues them, and guess what? It's not the organization they can sue. Now that person's liable, and their home and car and personal stuff is now in trouble, where with USA Hockey, we have, not to pump USA Hockey, but we have things in place to make sure that we protect our volunteers, like criminal insurance directors and officers, things like that, so you can serve on a board and not worry that your personal items and your personal health, physical health is in jeopardy for doing what you want to do and just help out kids. The second D is the duty of loyalty. So prioritize organization's best interests when making decisions, put aside professional and personal interests. Essentially, not trying to make sure that you're helping out your business. Let's say if you have a skate sharpening business and you're trying to make sure that all skates get sharpened by you, or you have a jersey business and sublimating business or printing business or whatever it may be, or your buddy's got a lawn care and you guys own the rink and you give him the contract, leasing out, or making decisions that tend to benefit your child or your friend's child versus the organization as a whole. Your duty is to the organization overall, not to your personal interests, which is hard. It's something you have to constantly remind yourself of, and people need to remember that. So even if something comes up, it is a conflict, then that's a great time to say, does anyone here use conflict of interest forms? We have a couple in the back. As a staff member, we have to fill it out every year, conflict of interest, just to make sure. But we have a sample conflict of interest form that you can use on Club Excellence, another plug for Club Excellence, so you can plug it in there. That's important because, once again, people may not know they have a conflict of interest, and all of a sudden, and they don't want to get in trouble. But then it gives just a good roadmap so that if something is maybe slightly could be a conflict, you can excuse them, say, hey, it used to be a great time for you to excuse yourself from the meeting or just not vote, or they can excuse themselves without having to, everyone's like, wait, why is Steve excusing himself in this important vote? Like, it's a little more transparent. It's out there saying, hey, I'm friends with the person that does this. I just don't feel like it's my place. So use your whistleblowers, use your conflict of interest. It's important in when making sure you can have a healthy duty of loyalty. And finally, duty of obedience. So following the association's mission statement and governing documents and making decisions, have the association operate within the scope of the law. Probably one of the most ridiculous meetings I was ever in. I won't pick on where I was at, but it was a state that borders Canada, and it was an hour, not Michigan. It was a 2-hour discussion whether they had to put in their bylaws that associations had to follow federal employment policies. So like if you're bringing a Canadian to coach, it had, like one person's adamant, it had to be in the bylaws that you had to follow federal immigration laws and things like that. I'm like, well, why is that a bylaw? Like that's just legal responsibility. But once again, know what's the scope of the law, go to your Secretary of State, know what's considered within the state of Michigan, and make sure all your board members know that mission statement, your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, everything that relates to you being an organization, they should know, because if they're going to vote and make decisions, they better know how you guys operate. So, I mean, I know it's kind of repetitive, we talked about a lot, but it's just so core. Like I can't get I'm going to make up a stat, like 9 out of 10 times and there's an issue, it's because someone didn't understand their bylaws or policies and procedures, or they hadn't or the organization had updated. If you have updated documents and your people have a general understanding, you're going to avoid a lot of issues. So I know I talked about this already, but I think it's so important because I even just seen today how few people have this. Use a conflict of interest. It'll save you so much heartache and heartburn, and have that whistleblower policy, because by law you're supposed to have it anyways, and make sure people know that they're aware of it. There's some other documents you can use too that I didn't put in here, but in Club Excellence we have, for instance, like a sample policy for document retention, like how long you should keep certain legal documents, financial documents, things like that, so that you can put that in place in your policies and procedures, so that if someone comes in from 10 years ago and says, hey, I did this, I got audited, you're supposed to have something of it. You say, hey, we stated it right here, we only keep these documents for 5 years, we don't have it, that's back on you. So, or if you should have had it. So feel free to use that. That came from our legal section, so it's not my brain on it. A lot of stuff, none of it's from my brain. I just steal it and I give it to you guys. So don't get nervous when you see me walking around that I'm the guide on this. So with that said, that's just kind of back to the basics. Hopefully I didn't put anyone to sleep. Of what it means to serve on a board, just what you should know when leading on a board, and your board members should know. And as promised, pictures of cute kids. So you remember, once again, why you do this. When I try not to scare the crap out of anybody, but you know why you're serving on a board, and what it means is to get kids on the ice, loving the sport that we love. So with that said, does anyone have any questions? That's my presentation for the day. Yes?
When are we going to be able to use the information in the registry to communicate with families?
It's still a couple years away. We got to get to a point where kind of the hope someday, and there's no real time frame because the registry is so big, is that every person, if I can manage my own, I keep hitting the mic, sorry, I can manage my own registration. So like if I move, I can log in, have my own username, go in, change my address. Or if I'm a coach and an official, I can log into my portal and everything I need to be a coach, all the safe sport, all the modules, all my officiating stuff's in one place. So that's kind of what we're striving to. And once we get to that spot where it's individual registrations, then we're hoping we can make sure everything syncs and talks and connects. Great. Thanks, everybody.